So will the Congress of the People be able to cope with issues impacting the party? President Mosiuoa Lekota, along with the National Chairperson and Acting General Secretary, will hold a media briefing today. It follows Lekota's suspension this week by COPE's National Committee after claims he failed to execute his duties. The party, which previously had 30 MPs in Parliament, now only holds 2 seats in the National Assembly. COPE Deputy President Willie Madisha joins us now to speak about this. Mr. Madisha, good morning and thank you very much for your time. You know, as per the information from 2 factions within COPE, there have been several suspensions in just the month of August. You were suspended along with Dennis Bloem and Mzwandile Nhleko on the 20th of August, and then you went on to suspend your president this past Monday on the 29th. What is the status of all of you as leaders? Have your suspensions all been lifted, or you're about to subject yourselves for DC?
Thank you very much and good morning. It is unfortunate that the president of COPE has come up with a way of making sure that COPE fights against itself, which is extremely unfortunate. I did not know that we have been suspended, and Mr. Lekota himself was not suspended by individuals. He was suspended by the leadership of the Congress of the People, which consists not only of the people who were elected at the Congress, but also all the provinces that had come together to say that should be the case. I mean, here you're talking about the people who are at work on a daily basis. You're talking about Dennis Bloem, you're talking about Nhleko, and myself, of course, who go out and work on a daily basis. He himself is not seen anywhere. The other persons that he says have come into the leadership are not even known. Some of them are not members. Some of them were long kicked out of the organization. And we are extremely surprised. Now, this has now become a history of what he has been doing since the beginning of this organization. It's extremely unfortunate.
You mentioned that he hasn't been seen anywhere. Well, one assumes that there would be more that a leader does than being visible or being seen by us. So I take it that that wouldn't be the criteria, perhaps, for his suspension. There must have been greater consideration of a number of issues when arriving at the decision to suspend him. Can you just take us through those? Yes,
and remember, I emphasized that the suspension was not done by Willie Madisha, who is Deputy President. It was done by the Congress National Committee, which consists of all the people from all the provinces, I'm referring to the leaders, together with the people who were elected at the Congress. Now, what they said mainly is that you have a president who moves from one province to the other to form a parallel structure. Yes, there is leadership there, but he comes up with people who are not even members of the organization and forms his own leadership, even without consulting with those people. He moves around and makes sure that he promotes the levels of corruption. And it is an open secret, for example, of that which he did in Ekurhuleni. Here is a man, a friend of his, who is not a councillor, who, when we went to the elections, was not even on the list by the councillors. And he takes that person and says, you are a councillor. And that person moves out and fights against other councillors. It's a coup d'etat. He takes over the leadership. We can't allow that.
And you took them to court for that. We understand that you then took them to court, which is something that they took exception to, and that's what led to your suspension on the 20th of August, according to that faction. Am I correct?
You are correct. When we rose now as the leadership of the organization to say, but this is wrong, the lawyers came in and we were supposed to go to court, but Mr. Lekota came and said, please go and beg those people who are protesting, who are taking my friend to court. And what I shall do, that's what he said, I will tell my friends to move out and not go on as a councillor. And we did that. We told those people to withdraw their court cases. But then he went, aside and said to his own friend, go on and become a councillor. And indeed, that is what the case is. We went to the IEC. The IEC can confirm that this person that has been made a councillor by himself was not supposed to be the case. That was not supposed to be the case. But he continues, he does all these kind of things. So there's a great level of corruption, and we can point out, I can give the nation the papers which show that there is a great deal of corruption. But then if you talk about corruption, I come from a rural area. The people there will not understand what corruption means. Now, I am saying corruption, what I actually refer to, is the stealing, literally stealing of finances, of making sure that monies are moved from there to that particular place. And some of us, for example, you can go back. When I was president of COSATU, when I was in the leadership of the Communist Party, when we were in the leadership of the ANC, we rose up and said, we cannot allow this kind of corruption, we cannot allow this kind of stealing, we cannot allow the killing of the people by the few. And even now, the people have risen, members of the executive, they have risen to say, we cannot allow this. That's why COOP was formed, and that's why COOP is there.
I want to talk to you about the trajectory of COPE. But before that, I just want to get clarity on your status. Are you then suspended because they insist they curated? It was 17 out of 30 members. What does the Constitution provide for? You could have held a CNC. They also held their own, and that's where they decided on your suspension. Is the status that the president and deputy, as well as Dennis Bloem as the spokesperson, are all suspended?
That is actually nonsense. Permit me to say that. Who suspends you? Can you go, for example, as the president of an organization, go to one school nearby your place, take some children from a classroom and say, you are the national leadership. Let's come up with a resolution that will remove the national leadership of my organization. And you then rise and purport that that is a legal gathering. Things don't work like that. There was a legal, a legal gathering, a proper meeting, actually convened by himself. And the meeting started 45 minutes. Why? Because we could not get hold of him. We've called him 7 times, and all the members of the the CNC, Congress National Committee, are the best witnesses. I said to them, wait for the president, wait for the president. He never came, but instead he went to this a meeting inside the Ronda, somewhere in Bloemfontein, and they came up with all this kind of nonsense. So I must say that there is no suspension of Dennis Bloem, there is no suspension of Kego and any other leader in the organization. There is no suspension of Willie Madisha, and that shall never be the case.
Is there a suspension of Mr. Lekota, though?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
He was not
so
suspended
it remains
by any individual. He was suspended by a collective of leaders from provinces, from the people who were elected directly at the Congress. And I want to say that kindly I beg him not to repeat that which he has been doing for 14 years since the birth of the organization. Why? Because that is what killed COPE. From a position where 1.3 million people voted for COPE, where we had 37 persons representing COPE at the parliament and the NCOP, to this level now, where we have only 2 members
in parliament. I mean, it's a very sad story. It really is a very sad story when we look at COPE, and many analysts, when they really want to talk about what infighting can do to a political party, they always point to what has happened to COPE. That from where you came from in your founding in 2008 to where you are now with just 2 seats in parliament is honestly a very sad story. But it's a story that you've been a part of, though. So when you say today, 14 years later, or you're saying now that he shouldn't do what he did then, where in 2010 you saw Mosiuoa leave, one would say, but Mr. Madisha, you were there. So at some point, it was okay when some of those things continued to happen and you were the second in command. But today, for whatever fallout that has happened, we're yet to establish his version today at least, then you're somebody that is now raising this concern that don't continue to do this. It means you allowed it. At the very least, you watched as it happened. Whatever it is, be it the squabbling among leaders, you would have been there.
I was there from the first minute when COPE was formed. And basically one played the second fiddle in the whole thing that was permeating over there. And yes, you are correct that all his deputies, he made sure that they go out. Mfundo was kicked out. Smartin Gonyam was kicked out. Now, Willie Madisha is trying to work very hard to make sure that things run properly in the organization. And he now goes around and rises and makes sure that his deputy is kicked out. Now, this has become something that is consistent. But then, yes, during those years, we said 1, 2, 3 are the correct positions. But then at the moment, things have arisen where we act with this kind of thing. But I emphasize that it has now become worse because it's not him alone. He takes people who are not members of the organization into a rendezvous somewhere, and we sit there with them and come up with this nonsensical resolutions. Whereas at the same time, the leadership of COPE, consisting of all the leaders of COPE from all the provinces of our organization, come, sit, take a decision, but then say that before we take the final decision, let us wait for our president to come. He doesn't. He is seated somewhere with the people who are not members of COPE, and he takes those kind of silly decisions. Must we allow that? But then we therefore said, by we, I'm referring to the meeting. The meeting said, wait, let's call the president. When he did not come, they said, let us take a decision. Not to fire him from the organization, not to remove him as the president of the organization, but to suspend him so that we can have a committee in line with the constitution of the organization, where it will be able to explain each and everything that he's doing. They said, but the president again is not well. He does not go to parliament. We are doing all this kind of things. Parliament has particular processes that it follows to make sure that persons who are not well are given a chance to recover. This is what is happening. You can ask the Speaker of Parliament, you can ask leaders of all the political parties. But then instead of him sitting with the leadership of the organization, he rises and boxes them. I have said this and I repeat, the leadership of COPE, with whom he was elected at the Congress, went to meet with him to say, Bonanda, you are not well. Can we please help you? And for all those, but for more than 2 years, he has been saying that, yes, I am not well. Kindly allow me to go and say to my family, I must rest. We said, no, that's fine. It's up to you. And those 4 occasions, he went, came back and said, no, give me a week and 2. He went and came back. And each time we had thought that, some sense would come into his head to say that, let us build the organization. The opposite has been the case through and through. But then it is unfortunate. All that I can do is to beg the people of South Africa and to beg members of COPE, to beg those who had wanted to join COPE, to say, please come back to COPE. COPE is there. COPE does not belong to one man. The president of COPE, yes, he may have been a president from the beginning, but it is not his own family object. Please come back. COPE is there. COPE as a constitution is the greatest level of sense we shall be able to go on. I know that I'm informed that this afternoon or morning, I'm not sure, he's going to call a press conference.
Yes, he'll be
to
speaking.
say what, I don't know, with his own friends that he held a meeting in Rwanda somewhere. I'm informed that there were less than 10 people. But then here you have all provinces, and the people were elected at the Congress were about 18 directly elected members, and who came together and said, this is how we must build the organization. President, where are you? Where are you? And the president is not there.
Mr. Madisha?
Of killing the organization. There. Yeah.
No, Mr. Madisha, thank you very much for your time. We'll then await that press briefing and at least get his version of events and who exactly, and find out from him, according to him, who exactly is suspended and who isn't. Thank you very much for your time. That was COPE Deputy President Willie Madisha.